Frank Figliuzzi is the retired FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence. As such, he was responsible for coordinating and supervising all investigations into intelligence services of other nations, foreign nations, trying to do harm for this country. In essence, countering foreign intelligence, which is the origin of the word counterintelligence, for those of you who always ask me what that means. Prior to his position in counterintelligence in the FBI, Frank was a special agent in charge of at least two different field offices that I'm aware of. Since he's retired, he has become a sought-after geopolitical analyst discussing national security issues for the United States. He can be seen regularly on MSNBC. He's also the author of two books, The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence, and The Long Haul, hunting the highway serial killers. And perhaps more importantly than that, Frank is a Goomba of mine. Welcome, Frank.
I don't think I've ever been introduced like that, but there's a first time for everything. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing well. It's hard to do well in these days, but I try.
Yeah.
Anyway, off air, we had just discussed something that's in the news here today and came out yesterday, and that has to do with the proposed, not proposed, the nomination for Tulsi Gabbard to assume, I don't know if it's all, but a lot more of the counterintelligence burden, responsibility for CI, counterintelligence in the United States, in the intelligence agency, taking, and correct me if I'm wrong, the responsibility or the bulk of that responsibility away from the FBI, which is, at least until now, the premier agency for counterintelligence in the United States. Can you talk about what you know of that proposed legislation, and also what you think of Tulsi Gabbard's qualifications for that?
Wow. Yeah. So we got to be careful to point out the obvious. We don't know what is in this proposal.
Correct.
But we do know what the reporting says so far, which is there is some move afoot, even in the form of proposed legislation, to give the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, more authority over all of counterintelligence across the intelligence community. So shifting from someone who oversees intelligence collection, the shopping lists for intelligence collection, the reporting to the White House of what the community has collected, now getting her squarely in an oversight position of counterintelligence. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Perhaps. First, the DNI's office has an office called the National Counterintelligence Executive, NCIX. Typically, that position has rotated between a former FBI official or current and a CIA official, and they take turns to kind of spread the wealth and create balance. So there is, I want people to understand, what problem are we fixing is the question we need to ask, and the question that Congress will need to ask. What's not going well in the world of counterintelligence that we need to somehow elevate the DNI to also a more powerful overseer of counterintelligence when an office called the National Counterintelligence Executive has already existed. And there is a concern in the reporting that I see that this might be putting her in some kind of operational role. God help us. And I say God help us because first, the FBI by Executive Order 12333 is the primary counterintelligence agency of the United States government, and for good reason. And in fact, when I was the head of counterintelligence for the FBI, we used to say, not in a bragging way, but in a technical way, that my position was the head of counterintelligence for the intelligence community because of that executive order. And that meant that I weighed in on non-FBI counterintelligence operations and had a seat at that table as well. So, for example, if the military intelligence services were going to run double agent operations or had an espionage case, at a minimum, I would get a heads up. And on the other end of the spectrum, I would have some kind of primacy over that, depending on who the target or subject was. Okay, so what problem are we fixing? Number two, um, what is broken or needs to get done better within the counterintelligence community, the spy catching community? I'm all for enhanced cooperation. If we can do something better, we should be doing it better, particularly with the partnerships across the intelligence community, because as I pointed out, the FBI is not by far the only agency that has some counterintelligence mission. Not by far. So is there a lack of coordination? Is the National Counterintelligence Executive, which sits under the DNI, is that broken? Not to my knowledge. What you may say, Frank, what do they do? What does that office do already? Well, some pretty cool things. They help assess and understand what the latest threats are and pass that along to the counterintelligence agencies of the government. They may task the counterintelligence agencies of the government, like the FBI, give us what you've got on China, Brazil, and any hot topic, whatever it is, give us what you got. What are you seeing? All of that is collated and collected, and then some pretty neat stuff goes on, like let's get our hands around double agent operations right now. Who's doing them? Are we running smack into each other? Could we? You hear police departments talk about blue on blue when cops end up shooting at each other because they don't know who's in the same building, right? Or undercover agents wearing, quote, the color of the day on the street so that another cop, maybe from another department, can immediately see this guy's wearing blue today or red today or yellow, and that's the color of the day. He's on the job. He's working. I should probably not shoot him. Okay? All of that goes on at the law enforcement level. At the intelligence and counterintelligence level, something similar goes on, which is, hold on, FBI, are you passing passage material like propaganda, fake stuff, to the Russians, while this agency over here is doing the same thing and not coordinating with you? Are we getting in trouble with ourselves? All of that coordination happens. Same thing for like debriefings of recruitments. Big win, FBI recruited this top-ranking Chinese official. Who would like to ask this guy questions? At what questions should we be asking this recruited official? All of that goes on at the DNI and the National Counterintelligence Executive level. So what's not working? I'm all for getting it better, but I get very nervous, number one, when an agency that serves as a clearinghouse and an overseer might be trying to go operational with by the way, no skill sets, no resources to do so, none. Number two, are we creating some kind of domestic spy agency within the DNI? Is that a possibility? Number three, what's Tulsi Gabbard really going at here? Because the FBI reportedly has put in writing strong objection, strong opposition is the language being used, and told Congress basically, hell no, we don't need this to happen, and not her. And why? She's unqualified to be in the DNI position in the first place. We talked about that endlessly when she was nominated. She has no CI experience. She can't go operational. It's not her office's mandate. And I think she might be bored out of her mind. So at the same time, she's downsizing and bragging about downsizing the DNI, which, okay, I'm for downsizing too. She also says, but by the way, I'd like a whole lot more power. So I'm totally confused, Dave.
Well, you bring up a great point, and I actually hadn't considered this yet because it's such a new story and there's so much going on. I just can't keep up with it all. I'll admit that. But the point that you brought up, which I find very intriguing, is whether or not, and this is just conjecture we're talking about now, whether or not this might be the preliminary steps to forming a domestic counterintelligence agency, or at least operation. Again, I hadn't really thought about that, but when you said that, my mind starts thinking, that's not too far fetched at all, because as you know, this administration is dismantling many of our cyber intelligence or offensive cyber intelligence capabilities. Now it looks like maybe our counterintelligence capabilities and many, many other intelligence gathering and other intelligence capabilities. Why would it be so out of the question that Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, under the direction of this administration, or at least someone in this administration, might be really thinking about forming a domestic intelligence agency under the DNI, if not totally renaming it and focusing towards the enemy within? What do you think?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. So you've got this very dark agency that very few people know a lot about, and in some ways for good reason. Um, and a huge budget, which she claims to be diminishing. And what an interesting place if you wanted to park and start a domestic spy agency. And you'd say, well, can't the FBI do that? Well, the FBI, remember, is also a law enforcement agency, very public. Most of its budget is not black at all. It's out there for you to see.
And they're not wearing masks yet.
They're not yet wearing masks. And they have a very clearly denunciated counterintel mission. They have to go to court for FISA wiretaps. That's particularly true for U.S. if they want to spy on U.S. citizens and get a court-authorized wiretap on a suspected spy or terrorist. So it's a very public function that it serves, even though its counterintel function is, of course, classified. Okay, so what if the administration's not happy with that? What if the administration wants to start spying more on its own people, on Americans? Where would you park this thing? Well, certainly not in a law enforcement agency. And you might say, or maybe Tulsi's come up with this brilliant idea on her own, which is, hey, park it over here. No one knows what we're doing. We already have oversight of counterintelligence. See, this is where I get suspicious. When I hear this proposed legislation to give the DNI oversight over counterintel, she already has it. So what is going on here?
I smell, and I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I'll say it. I smell the fingerprints of Stephen Miller on this. Why? Because for very good reasons. He is the prime motivator or the prime architect right now in the whole ICE moves, the Homeland Security moves, the National Guard moves into American cities, the whole thing about the masks and all of that. He is really behind. In fact, he may have written that enemy within speech. In fact, I think he did for Donald Trump. So I would not put it past him. In fact, I could very well see him behind this proposed legislation to move the operational function of counterintelligence away out of the FBI and putting it under the DNI, whether or not they have any experience in that, or she doesn't have any experience in that or not. Because why have due process? Why deal with an agency that actually has to follow the law? Like the FBI, just give it to someone who doesn't care.
No, I think, David, I don't want to sound alarmist, but I think we're on to something here. It merits playing this out, and Congress needs to think seriously about this, because if, again, she already has the National Counterintelligence Executive. She already can force counterintel agencies to report to her. So what's the next step here if you want to increase her power?
Operational control.
Right. Yeah. And so she doesn't have bodies. She has a large staff, don't get me wrong, but she doesn't have agents to do this. She has them embedded, of course, in their respective agencies. So would the next step be, hey, now where there might have been some form of shady dotted line to the DNI, now all counterintelligence resources, and again, this is conjecture, might report to her. The budget becomes black, and they become divorced, in a sense, from their respective home agencies. So in other words, FBI counterintel agents and analysts might really work for her.
Why a black budget, though, Frank? They don't care if the public knows at this point. This is just one executive order away.
Yeah. And now, right. So now you've taken them away from law enforcement. You give them some darker mission. Very troubling. This should be, and I realize I say this a lot, David, when I'm on broadcasting. I say, yeah, this should be front page news. Well, the thing is, there's 100 things a day now that should be out front page news, and this kind of thing is going to slip through because
Oh yeah.
most Americans go, I don't know, this sounds like alphabet soup. I don't know anything about
You
spying.
know, Frank,
Yeah,
and it sounds silly. Well, I agree with you 1,000%. That's why I kind of make a tongue in cheek. I made a tongue in cheek comment at the opening of this broadcast about that's what counterintelligence means because people have no clue. When I say counterintelligence, my whole life, people look at me, like I'm speaking Venusian or something. They have no idea what it means. So to them, like you said, this is just alphabet soup. This is just another government three-letter agency or two-letter or whatever. It's just not
yeah,
important to my life. I'm worried
right.
about the cost of coffee and bananas and eggs.
Right. And if you got a concern writ large throughout the government right now, I think we'll talk about this in a second, that there's protests coming, protests are developing. No King's Day has scared the hell out of the administration. I don't care what they tell you. And now you're thinking, how do we get a handle on what's happening domestically? The way to do it would be to call it counterintelligence, which would be, domestic spying, what they're thinking, and slip it under Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, and again, and I mean this seriously because I hadn't thought about this again until you mentioned it earlier about this story and the possible meaning of it. I don't think if what we're saying has any grain of truth, I don't think they're going to hide it in the black budget. I just don't because they're not doing that now. They are out in the open with all of this. This will just come about with an executive order, and most Americans, like you just said, it's going to
Yeah.
slip right by them, and the media. Forget it. They're not even going to pick it up. A few
Yeah.
podcasters like myself, but that's about it.
Well, I know one of my homework assignments after we speak is going to be okay, find out who proposed this legislation. I can see in the reporting that Mark Warner has come out strongly against it already. It appears so, but are those whoever proposed it, are they tight with Tulsi and or the president? Who that could tell us a lot about whether these are straight up people who simply want to better coordinate counterintelligence or whether there's an agenda here.
There's an agenda here because, again, what you just said is so right, Frank. The No Kings marches have scared them. And, they're going after the street protesters and maybe some of the local organizers, but some of them, and I hate to keep saying it, but the Stephen Millers and so forth, with a little bit more brain power saying, no, we've got to go after the higher ups. We've got to go after the organizers. We have to step up our game. And the way that you do that is with domestic spying. We need to have a domestic counterintelligence, a domestic spying agency to actually root out the heads of this at the state or even the national level. I see that's where this is going, possibly.
Possibly so. And again, the fastest way to do it would be to simply wave a wand and tell counterintelligence agents in the bureau and elsewhere, "Hey, you fall under the DNI now."
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah, because and again, I'm just thinking about this with all of these CI capable individuals, special agents, for example, in the military. You've got there's 16 different intelligence agencies, if I'm not wrong. And how many of them are in the military? How many of them are in agencies, including like Department of Energy? I mean, they're all over the place.
oh yeah,
If an executive agent order just said, okay, half 50% of all those agents are now part of the DNI, you're working CI for Tulsi Gabbard and the DNI, she'd get thousands of people overnight, trained, experienced CI agents.
yeah, yeah. Some of whom would have to speak out when they get asked to do something unlawful. Yeah, and I think Americans would be shocked at, you mentioned how many agencies might have a counterintel function. When I took over CI, I was floored. But I was like, what, the Treasury? What? And
Yeah.
yes, I knew DOE, absolutely, Department of Energy. Yeah, but people would be surprised. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't know. Maybe maybe the Smithsonian. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't
No,
know.
I don't think so. But but most of them do. Most of the 16, well, there's 16 intelligence agencies. In any event, let's move on. We kind of danced around the fact that things are getting darker. There was not just a report. I saw a video yesterday along with the one we're talking about the DNI and Tulsi Gabbard, with President Trump aboard Air Force One, where he was asked about the current status of National Guard troops in various cities, the Homeland Security, Border Patrol in various cities, and the arrests they're making, so forth and so on. And he said that he is very open, in fact, eager, I think was the word, to sending in not just the National Guard, but all of the military. And he literally said the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps, he might have mentioned the Coast Guard, I'm not sure, but the Army, into American cities. It was bad already, but that really talks to his mindset, his attitude towards that, unleashing the entire strength of the United States military on American citizens in American cities. I'll just ask for your thoughts on that alone.
He's not very good at hiding his intentions. You got to give him that. He wears it on his sleeve, and he tells us what he's going to do, and it's time we believe him. And if you're thinking, oh come on, it's far fetched, he likes to mess with the left. He's said this enough now and demonstrated that he'll put armed Marines around the federal building in Los Angeles because he's done it. You know, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. And you've got to understand something. That's not who we are as a nation, number one. Number two, I'd be the first one to come out and go, you know what? We've lost control. We can't, law enforcement's done. We can't do this. It's chaos. We're losing everything. Send in the Marines. I'd be the first one to come out and say, we've lost it. We got to do it. We're nowhere near that, David. We are nowhere near ignoring posse comitatus, which is that the military shall not be in a law enforcement role in the United States. We're nowhere near that. And he seems hell-bent on doing it. And I'm convinced all he needs is the slightest excuse, and he's going to do it. I came out the other day on social media and I said, in response to some of this, I said, look, he wants an insurrection so badly. Please don't give it to him. And there was a handful of people who came back at me and said, you know, grow a pair, Frank. We've got to fight. We're going to go down swinging. And I said, you know, to myself, because I'm not responding to that. So, yeah, no, but it's not time to go down swinging right now. You would be handing him. I don't know what you mean. You know, these people who you know, the keyboard bravado, you know, I'm going to go down fighting for I grow a pair. You ready for that? I'm sorry. Do you understand what I'm saying? That you'll be up against the United States Marines in your neighborhood? What are you fighting? What? So don't give him, when we get to the point where a revolution is needed, you know, I get that. I hope to God it's not needed. But if you think that throwing a rock at an ICE agent is the way to fight back and avoid the Marines coming, you're wrong. You're wrong.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I've said that many, many times, including after the Kirk assassination. About, you know, just take a breath. That I'm as angry as you, probably more angry than most of you, and I do not advocate violence. I do not advocate taking to the streets and attacking ICE agents or the Border Patrol or the U.S. military or the police or anything else. Definitely get out there in the tens of millions and protest peacefully. But do not give President Trump an excuse for invoking the Insurrection Act. You mentioned a great point. I want to ask you a follow-up on that. Many MAGA, for whatever reason, are attracted to this channel. You know, they like to attack me. That's great. Fine. I love debate. Not so much for MAGA, because they don't debate, they insult. However, I would like you to address what you just said, which is that we are nowhere near insurrection. We are nowhere near the point where the president of the United States needs to deploy the U.S. military to the streets of America. Would you please say, for the MAGA out there, why you feel, as the former retired assistant director of the FBI for counterintelligence, why you feel we are not at the point where the United States military needs to be deployed to American cities to put down insurrection?
So first, I'm a data guy. I'm a just the facts guy. That's 25 years of being in law enforcement. I got to go on data, and the data is not there now. if your MAGA listeners are caught up in the rabbit hole of just watching Fox or OAN and just seeing, or even I did a piece yesterday on Substack, just watching the slick Hollywood videos and productions coming out of DHS these days. I mean, do you know DHS has professional camera videographers following the ICE troops around and making things look as bad as possible, and then claiming that it's happening in Portland and Chicago and or DC. I did check out my Substack on that. It's one of my latest broadcasts, calling them out on this kind of crooked social media strategy. But if you're caught up in that, then you say, Frank, I see the data. I see the evidence in front of my eyes. The streets are gone. Portland's burning. Chicago's in chaos. Well, wake up, people. It's not. It's not. But this administration is fixing to get ready. So I have not yet seen a situation where state police authorities, and even, dare I say, the National Guard in a state called out by its governor for peacekeeping, for crowd control, traffic control, cannot handle on its own any situation that has arisen so far. I have not yet seen a situation, and someone should point it out to me. Go ahead. If I'm missing something, where armed United States active duty military is necessary in a city. Please show me that. This performative show that went on around the LA Federal Building with active duty armed Marines was just that. It was a performance, a show of power in arguably the most liberal state we have. It was testing the envelope, getting us used to, let's get Americans used to armed Marines in our cities. And you can't, when that genie comes out of the bottle, you cannot put it back. You cannot put it back.
I want to circle back to that, but I need to make a quick point as a follow-up to what you just said. You mentioned Portland is burning to the ground, and people are watching this on OIN and OAN and Fox News and Breitbart and on and on and on. That was exposed a while back. That the scenes depicted allegedly in Portland burning to the ground that were put out by MAGA were actually video from South American riots 5 years ago. And it was proven, and the Republicans, the MAGA, eventually admitted that it was, and it changed no one's mind. They don't care.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and the Washington, I've got to credit, there's a great piece in the Washington Post that just recently came out, and they dug deeply into this propaganda campaign, this Hollywood-style propaganda campaign out of DHS, to show people that it's horrible here. Look at the great work we're doing, and they did a neat job. They started geolocating video. They started there's software that allows you on the internet to determine where the real video came from originally, where the photo came from, and case after case after case, they showed DHS was faking it. They were faking the locations. I mean, on the most blatant example, Dave, there was a palm tree in Washington, D.C. or Chicago. We don't have palm trees in Washington, D.C.
Really?
So, I mean, yeah, it was just stupid stuff like that. And they caught him, and they asked the DHS spokesperson for a statement, and she wouldn't deny that it's wrong, that it's inaccurate, but she just said, look, we're going to continue our mission. Oh, okay, so you admit it. You're lying to us.
Well, again, you can't convince people that are in a part of this brainwashing, this cult. And I always bring up the story very quickly about the 2016 election that Trump won. And there was the allegations, as you know, of Russian meddling, which, as it turns out, it was true. And many news organizations at that time, when they were still functioning as news organizations, went to Republican voters and said, do you realize, we have the proof, I'll show you right here, this is on camera, that many of the people you were conversing with on social media, allegedly Trump supporters and fellow Republicans, were actually Russian agents operating out of a building in St. Petersburg, Russia, part of the GRU. And they read it and they said, well, that looks correct, but we don't care. We still love Trump. And so you
Yeah, yeah,
can't convince them. You can't change their mind, even when you confront them with the truth.
right.
The other point I want to follow up on right now is what you just said, which again is immensely important that I don't think MAGA is getting, or if they do, they don't care. And that is
Yeah.
that what's going on right now, among many, many other negative things, is that the Trump administration is getting the American public used to the military being deployed on the streets. They are getting them used to mask camouflaged thugs on the streets, just disappearing people every day. And so they are preparing them for, again, what I believe is the next year's elections. They've already said they're going to send monitors to, was it California and New Jersey, to supervise the elections there because they don't believe that the liberal governors can do a good enough job. Well, you know what that means, monitor the elections. There's going to be armed troops there, and they're going to
Well,
intimidate people. So
and
they're getting the
even
American people used to this, ready for this eventuality.
yeah, yeah, and even on the low end of the spectrum of this so-called monitoring is if you monitor, if you're planning to monitor, you're planning to find something, right? You without allegation. Okay, so again, I'm a facts guy. If you've got allegations of significant fraud going on in a location, by all means, let's do something about it. But if you don't, then and you announce we're going to monitor these two liberal places that we're worried about, okay, then you know what's coming. It's a setup. We found irregularities. And what does that allow you to do? It allows you to call timeout. It allows you to challenge the outcome of that election, even perhaps stop the election in its course, go to court, drag it out, have people doubting the outcome. And you know what happens if lots of people doubt the outcome because you've convinced them to doubt it. You have a January 6th on your hands, at least maybe at a state capitol near you.
I'm going to ask you a non-law enforcement, non-counterintelligence question, and that is how why do you believe that it looks like at least 50% of the voting public in America are falling for this descent? There's no other way to say it, to descent into fascism so quickly and so thoroughly. Why do you think this is, at least thus far, successful?
So this is complicated. There's no single answer to this, and we shouldn't try to come up with a simple answer. First of all, using the so-called F word, fascism, um, which, by the way, in most mainstream media organizations, you're not allowed to use. Did you know that?
Yes,
You're
I
not
do.
allowed to
They
use it.
dance all around it.
Yeah, yeah. Even if, again, I'm a facts guy, even if you hold up the dictionary definition of fascism and some of the things happening today, and you go, boy, that looks very similar.
Or you quote the speeches that are taken directly from Mussolini or
I
some
know.
others.
I know. Yeah. All right. But here, as a technique, as a kind of counter technique, using that word with the MAGA folks automatically creates tremendous anger and shuts them off. So I'm careful about that word, and there'll come a time, I believe, when there can be no denial that we're in it. But just be aware, as a strategy, you're gonna lose the argument if you're trying to convince a coworker, friend, neighbor, or have a civil dialogue with it. Just like the left doesn't like to be called, I don't know, libtards, communists, communists, which I challenge anyone who calls someone on the far left, like Mamdani in New York, he's a democratic socialist. We could argue for an hour about that and what that means and whether it's good for the country or not. But Trump is smart. He's calling him a communist. And so I challenge someone to really study the definition of communism and show me that Mamdani's a full-blown communist. No. So what are the buckets we can put some of this in? Number one, there are true believers who actually have studied, have thought about this for a while, and decided that this concept of what they call a strong executive is needed right now. At this moment in time, they believe that crime is out of control. They won't look at the data that shows it's not. In fact, when they look at it, they go, I challenge that data. I don't like that. That data is not right because I got mugged and therefore the crime's out of control, right? Or I had a friend who had their car stolen. Okay, so we're going to throw data out the window. And you believe the answer is National Guard coming near you. Number two, the concept of a strong executive. We can't say authoritarian or dictator. Strong executive because nothing gets done in Washington. It's a self-perpetuating inside the Beltway club. And by the way, there is some truth to that. Yeah, been there, worked there, lived there. And therefore, we need to throw it all out and start over again. And the way to do it is to have kind of a king who can cut through all of that. Or it's time for a president to have a shot at his ideology. Regardless of the ideology, let's see what this guy can do. Okay? I question whether you'd say that about a Democratic president, but okay. The other portion of these folks who are buying into it are simply literally cannot come out of the rabbit hole. When I ask these folks, I have family members like this. What's on your TV on the evening news? Fox all day. Fox all day. Anything else? OAN. Okay. What do you read? Where do you get your news? Online. Breitbart. Okay. I mean, do you ever have an inkling to go see what the other side is saying the facts are? No, I can't watch that. Those are lies. Okay. All right. You decided that. Oh, okay. Or someone told you that. So there's that group that simply doesn't want to examine other alternative opinions because they're convinced it's all lies. And even worse, David, it's evil. And some of that comes from so-called Christianity. I say so-called because it's not the Christianity I was raised with. It's not the Gospels that I was raised with. But you think it's Christian to not feed people, to have a Fox News host claim that homeless people should be executed. Wow. Okay. There's that a strong, disturbing link to Christian nationalism. Very strong. They think Christianity is under attack. We could talk for now. There's books written about this, but I don't think there's a simple answer. I do think people are seeking simple answers for complex problems, and I think Trump gives them that.
Well, that's where all authoritarian leaders get their strength. They alone can fix it. We're in dark times. The country is about to go under. It's an existential crisis. We have an enemy within, and on and on and on. And you need a strong leader, and I'm that leader. Frank, one last question for today on this. I get all you're saying, and I agree with you. This is a very, very complex question, and you cannot answer it with one sentence or one theory. There's many, many, many layers to this. But having said all that, even with the Christian nationalists and all that, where does the abject cruelty come from? The sense that people not only need to be defeated, but they need to be killed, and their family needs to be killed, and not just killed, but publicly executed, and on and on. Where does that come from?
I do think that this harkens back to my days working international terrorism and the concept of infidels, right? In radical violent jihadists and radical violent Islam. The concept that once you label someone an infidel, that they somehow become less than human, and they are deserving of destruction, and there's a reward. There's a reward in heaven for eliminating the infidels because they are a threat to your existence. Once you've convinced people of that, you can do almost anything. And I believe that that's happened. And if you say, Frank, that's really kind of far-fetched, people are willing to die for this. They're willing to go breach the field office and FBI field office in Cincinnati, and then die in the dirt of a cornfield when they refuse to surrender to the police. The guy in Provo, Utah, who swung a rifle at FBI agents after threatening to kill Biden and others, and he had to be killed by the agents. This goes on and on and on. If at the point you're willing to die for a mistaken belief, you've got a problem. And so much of this is coming from a threat, a sense that my religion is being threatened. My deepest core beliefs are being threatened. Once you've labeled somebody an evil infidel, all bets are off.
But would you agree this is new to America? It's not something that we could say, oh, this has happened before. This has never happened before. Not on this scale. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I can't see it. I don't see it. You look back at McCarthyism and everybody being labeled communists. We weren't calling for their death and destruction. The Civil War was actually legitimate in terms of the perceived existential threat to the nation.
And it wasn't their families that were targeted either. Again, this is something new and
Right.
grotesque.
You know what I last night I watched the brand new documentary on Adam Kinzinger and his family. It's called The Last Republican. It's a great title. And there's a portion of that documentary where they play some of the violent threats that he and his family received because of his participation on the January 6th committee. And by the way, he's far from alone in receiving those criminal threats. But it's if you say, "Oh, come on, we're not calling for killing families." Oh, yes, you are. Yeah, listen to the threats. Listen to the threats. And they're criminally actionable. Eric Swalwell, too. You might think I hate the guy, but is he an evil infidel worthy of death to him and his family? You're out of your mind.
And the Department of Justice has just refused to pursue an investigation into those threats. That's loathsome.
Well, that we are seeing selective investigation now, aren't we?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
So,
we did.
all right, we could go on and on about this and get ourselves both whipped up into a frenzy, and we're not going to do that today, at least. Um, I'm sure we'll talk again in the very near future, Frank. Frank, you mentioned that you've got a Substack. I would encourage people to go find Frank Figliuzzi's Substack, and also the books that I mentioned, The FBI Way and The Long Haul. Please, they're worth reading, and check them out on Substack, and hopefully back here in the very near future.
Yeah. Thank you for that plug. I'm on Substack at the Frank Figliuzzi because I guess the sincerest form of flattery is that people are trying to imitate me. So now my handle on Substack is the Frank Figliuzzi. And
okay.
check out my stuff. And by the way, go ahead and dialogue with me if you're not going to threaten me and use obscenities. I respond to civil discussion. So there you have
it. And I agree with you, Frank. Both of us, if you are MAGA, if you support Donald Trump, the Republicans, or just disagree with anything either one of us have said, we are both interested in dialogue. We are not interested in being the recipients of irrational and violent threats, but we are interested in having very good discussions. And I'll leave it on that note. Frank Figliuzzi, the retired Assistant Director of the FBI for Counterintelligence, thank you so much. You take care and stay safe.
Same here. You too, Dave.